Good evening, everyone. Or would you like to do the introduction with me? Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Samantha Danchuk. I'm Aptam's Climate and Resilience Lead. Great to see you again. I was able to join for the first public meeting we've had. This project has focused on West Miami's vulnerability assessment. We are very pleased to bring some results to you today, and we hope to make this an interactive meeting. The idea would be to help prioritize the projects that we have outlined, understand even more from you about some of the maybe flooding issues that you've seen around town, some of the needs that you may have from the community. We are joined tonight by our phenomenal partner, Mosaic Group, who will be helping us with the community outreach and help us make sure that we get as much input from you as we can. We're also joined by my staff here at Aptam. Bridget Houston, who's an urban planner, and Ayana Albertini-Fleuron, who is joining us as a resilience planner as well. And then I want to give credit for our host tonight, for Jenny Hall. She is our grants manager and has been our contact throughout this project, and we are going to be wrapping up at the end of the year. So tonight I would like to share with you some of the hazards that we have analyzed as affecting West Miami. These would be hurricanes, this would be really flooding threats. Describe to you what a vulnerability assessment is, gather more input from you, and also share with you what we've heard to date from the community. We have been trying to communicate online and as well as through paper surveys and getting information from the community. We will share the results of the vulnerability maps tonight and some of the focus areas, and also highlight for you some of the assets that we have found to be vulnerable. We want to talk to you about next steps and opportunities so that you can continue to advocate for flood mitigation within your community and share what types of projects that you would like to advance. So just as a review, the hazards that we focused on for the vulnerability assessment included sea level rise. So although sea level rise does not directly affect West Miami, right? We're not on the beach here tonight. It actually does have an impact because it raises the groundwater table throughout Miami, and that has an impact on how quickly rainwater can soak into the water, or soak into the ground and ultimately reach the groundwater. And then also, West Miami really depends on water moving quickly to the canals and draining out to the ocean in order for it to really maintain floods, severe floods when they occur. And so when you are not able to drain to the ocean because sea levels are now higher, it really backs up the system, and so you don't have as much capacity to drain to the canals as you used to. And looking forward into the further future, this becomes a problem. And so we've looked at some of those impacts. Also want to talk tonight about storm surge. Storm surge from a Category 4 or Category 5 actually can reach West Miami. So we did look at those extreme storms and what assets were vulnerable to that. And then, of course, rainfall, which, you know, how many days has it rained this week? And then what happens if it rains day after day after day and there's not just one? Oh, please.
What level of surge would it be that it would actually reach Miami?
It's pretty significant, right? Because you guys are higher and it's pretty far. So I think Category 4 and Category 5, Bridget, if you'll remind me, it might be 13 or 14 feet. So these are extreme storms. But we'll get that number for you. I don't remember offhand. But for rainfall, looking at, you know, even just a storm that occurs every 25 years is already over a foot of rain, right? And then your flood insurance rate maps are based on a storm that occurs every 100 years, so that's a more extreme storm, and we looked at that as well. Fortunately, the South Florida Water Management District has done some recent modeling to let us know the impacts from various storms, combined it with sea level rise and groundwater rise so that we have a better understanding of how things will change over time. So the steps of the vulnerability assessment include data collection so that we could get an inventory of all the important properties, assets, pieces of equipment that the city owns and maintains, that the community relies on, and we put all of that into a database that we can look at spatially. Then on top of that, we lay these scenarios for flooding. And so those would include the hazards that I just described. And the first step is just determining whether those assets would be exposed or not exposed to the different flood scenarios. So it's kind of either in or out, right, of those flood extents. From that, we also get flood depths at each asset. And we also have an understanding of what the percentage of the city is impacted, and you know, the extent which certain areas are more impacted than others for the various scenarios. The next step, we take more time to look in depth of the sensitivity of each of the assets. So some of the assets may have you know, a foot of flooding, and it doesn't really affect them, right? They can still operate, it doesn't fry the electrical panel, everything's fine, right? You can step through it. Well, whereas something else may be very low lying, and so that foot of flooding means that it doesn't work anymore. Or maybe not only does it not work, but maybe you can't use the, you know, piece of equipment that it's connected to. It shuts down multiple pieces of equipment as a result of its failure. And so we look at that in detail. We use data that the city provided to us to kind of do that additional analysis. And then ultimately we rank the risks and try and get an idea of what's the highest risk, what's the lowest risk, and that from that we can extract what projects should be looked at by the city. And so we have had an ongoing community survey throughout this project, and this still remains open tonight. So if you want to use this QR code, you can respond to this survey. This will give us an idea of where you're seeing flooding, what type of projects you think are needed for mitigating flooding. It also gives us an idea of what else you're interested in the city, and often there's opportunities to align flood mitigation with other improvements in the city. And so to date, we've seen flooding reports in the Cooper Park area near City Hall, 59th Avenue and 15th Street, 64th Avenue at 20th Street, and then there were the interest from the respondents for improving drainage systems, repairing sidewalks, improving lighting in certain areas, and traffic calming where possible. And so this was from a small sample survey. We really would love all of the community to continue to participate, so please go ahead and fill out the survey. This will stay open till the end of the project, and we do directly try and incorporate this data into our analysis, and it verifies what we're seeing in the modeling. So far we have seen that the majority of the residents that have responded, a resounding 80%, are interested in prioritizing projects that address flooding. So that's a validation of the usefulness of this study. The intent is that this is work that can be used as drainage projects are designed. As the city is looking to prioritize different capital projects, they will have this resource, you know, into the future and be able to turn back to it and see, you know, what priorities should be set. Also want to look at how the community rated certain hazards as being, you know, priorities of what they wanted evaluated. So rainfall was very high on the list. Sea level rise was comparatively low. And then heat was about medium, and community burden, which could be, you know, thinking about rising property prices and or, you know, rising insurance rates in response to changes in the community, kind of community burden and handling all of the things that are happening here in South Florida was ranked as medium. So first, we are going to show you some of the exposure maps. So you'll see the black line is encircling the city of West Miami, and then you'll see little circles like these yellow dots are actually showing where the critical infrastructure is located. So these may be pump stations, they may be lift stations, they may be locations of facilities. We also looked at roads, and we also look at natural infrastructure. We look at the schools, and so we'll talk about that in more detail. But in blue, you'll see where there's actually exposure to the Category 4 storm surge and the Category 5 storm surge. Because we have cut the results to just be in the city boundary, you're not actually seeing that the floodwater is moving from the canal to reach the city. That's actually the source of flooding for the storm surge. The storm surge comes up the canals, assuming that the floodgates are open. So Category 4 storm affects 13% of the city and about 19% of the city-owned assets. A Category 5 storm would actually impact 40% of the city and 40% of the city assets. So that is significant, right? These are very extreme storms. We don't expect them to occur all the time. However, when they do, it really would be monumental for the city to have to handle. There would be water sitting here for quite a few days and damage that would need to be repaired for a long recovery time. And so the idea is to look at these results and figure out what could be done in advance or planned proactively so that you could recover quicker. And there was no direct impacts from sea level rise or tidal flooding, but we do also look at that as part of the study. The study was funded by the Resilient Florida program, and the grant actually specifies which scenarios should be looked at as a minimum, and so we've met and complied with all of those guidance. So looking at flooding from rainfall, we can see here, this is actually an extreme storm as well, but in the dark blue, this is from a 500-year storm. So again, this is even bigger than what your flood insurance rate maps are based on. But because rainfall flooding to this extreme elevation is not that common, this is what we needed to look at just to give an idea of what risk this would be. So not a very frequent event. However, it would have severe impacts. And so the flooding here, though, is even on the order of less than 3 feet for these areas that are shaded in blue. These are the results from the South Florida Water Management District modeling that I had shared. So we have showed the flood depths here running up to about 3 feet in red, but anything that's in the blue range is less than a foot. And you can see that there are impacts from both the 25-year 3-day storm as well as the 100-year 3-day storm, but obviously the more severe storm has much more comprehensive impact across the city. And this gives us an idea of the way we rate risk is looking at, well, something that might not happen as frequently, but maybe it has a really deep flood depth, then we put it higher up on the list. Whereas something that has really happens more often, but maybe is a nuisance, gets put lower on the list. So let's look at roads. So the roads that are flooded, and again, this is not detailed modeling in the way that you would do like a stormwater master plan or actual dynamic modeling of the water going in and out of the drainage system. This is just looking at the extent of flooding that's possible from coastal models as well as from simplified rainfall models that were already completed before this study. So just to pull out, you can see some of the roads that are impacted. Obviously, Southwest 8th Street, Southwest 9th Street. Looking at certain lift stations, you can see that the school is relatively dry, but the routes to the school are impacted, as well as the park has some flooding in it. As expected, there are some low points within the park that would likely collect water. I do want to highlight that there are about 44% of the city maintained roads are at risk under a Cat 5 storm surge. So that kind of gives you the highest, the maximum impact that you would see across the city for a severe storm. Do want to highlight some of the flood depths for the stormwater treatment facilities. So for the 2 major pump stations that support the city, these are really critical, and they are pieces of infrastructure that may need to be replaced in the short term. They do have some flood depth that would likely occur during these severe storms, reaching up to 3 or 4 feet in the areas around them, which means those pumps would really have to be moving a lot of water in order to continue operating, and they themselves, depending on how high the electrical equipment, they themselves may be vulnerable to failure as a result of flooding. And so these are the types of projects that can be advanced in future grants. The Resilient Florida program also funds implementation grants based on the planning that was done through this assessment, and so this would be, great projects to advance to try and get some additional funding for. Similarly, there are a couple lift stations that are vulnerable to flood depths that would have an impact on their continued function.
Can you go back to
Yeah, 2. Okay.
there's a
Okay.
That's 66,000.
Oh, thank you. We will correct that before we distribute. 6466. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. We were asked to really focus at the schools, so we, took the time to do a site review around the school. I came down during a day where there had just been a lot of flooding. I did notice that, in the route or the road that's immediately adjacent to the school, unlike some of the other roads in the city, it doesn't have curb drainage, right? There's just swales on both sides. The trees are there as well that might be absorbing some water. But I did notice how low-lying the sidewalk was. So if students are trying to reach the school by walking, that's probably the first area that's flooding on their way to school. And so there is probably some opportunity for some drainage improvement in that area. We did note that the school, though, looked relatively dry. And so that's very positive. We looked at the other two schools that the city is zoned for as well, so that we had an understanding of how dry their commute was and what might impacts would be for the various storms. So we did also want to highlight that there are a few, the recreation center would be affected by severe storm surge for those extreme events, up to about 3 feet, which can cause some moderate damage. And then for the fire station, really relatively resilient, would make it through category hurricanes that we would typically see. But for the most extreme event, there could be up to 3 feet of flooding for that 500-year rainfall event. And again, that's a very, very rare event. But if you are trying to set very high standards, it would be good to do some flood proofing around the fire station to protect against that first foot of flooding. And same for the police station. Okay, so we did also focus on some of the natural resources, which in the city of West Miami would be the parks. And, beautiful parks here, a lot of open space that could actually be considered, green infrastructure. This is space for water to absorb naturally, for it to percolate and to even temporarily store some of the rainwater after an event. And we did note that there's relatively medium risk for the West Miami Recreation Center. For a very severe event, there could be severe flooding in that area. Cooper Park is much more resilient, and it's at a higher elevation, so the flood depths there that could occur are much less than a foot. And then we also looked, or just made the note that's important to note, that in South Florida, Miami, West Miami included, we're all facing the impacts of sea level rise intruding into our groundwater supplies where we get our drinking water from. And so as we look, 40 years into the future, there are many sources of information that are letting us know that, the water is going to be saltier, and so it'll either cost more to process it, or we'll have to, change the wells that we use in order to get our fresh water for drinking. And so just acknowledge that as part of the study. Wanted to focus on economics, so to see if there were any risks related to socioeconomics that should be considered as we prioritize projects. So the population did change between 2020 and 2023, a slight decrease. We did see an increase in the younger population. We did note that the median household income is high for South Florida, but there is a slight income equality issue in the neighborhood. So there are some people that have, above the median salary, and then there are some people that have much significantly lower than the median salary. And housing affordability is likely a challenge here in the community. There were at least 30% of the homeowners that had mortgages that were more than 30% of their household income. And so that creates stress for community owners. And so what we worry about is if those same owners are then facing flood damage or the opportunity, issues that may cause them to have either more repairs that they're paying for, or they're late for work because they had to drive through flooding, things like that. It can create additional stress on community members that we'd like to try and mitigate through different mitigation projects. And so we did look at green infrastructure in the city. So the city has had a very successful grant for implementation of new trees being planted along the streets. Not only do these trees mitigate heat effects and as well as beautify the community, but they also do, absorb some water. So that's what we were looking for is, are there areas of the community that could continue to have trees added so that there could be, green infrastructure benefits to the community? And so we've highlighted those in the report. But looking at it, trying to find areas where you can temporarily store water and allow water to percolate into the ground would be helpful. It helps on those, more frequent rainfall events to have water in the swales instead of water in the streets. You already have a great example of permeable pavers near the park that I think are a great opportunity to allow some water to percolate. And as long as those are maintained and can continue to allow water to drain, that's a great example of integrating green infrastructure in your system. And so this information really was useful for us to try and highlight what types of grants as well as what projects could be advanced in the next steps. So there is funding available to support resilience of wastewater facilities, lift stations, and stormwater pumps, which we did identify as being at risk in the community. So we would suggest moving that information forward in order to try and get some attention on addressing those risks, please.
Are the pumps we have strong enough for the floodings that we have now or not?
It's my understanding that they are able to function continuously. We did learn about an issue where there was the power source was lost temporarily, so there's always opportunities to make systems more resilient through redundant power, trying to flood proof the actual pump that's being well, and its enclosure, right? But we did not identify, and we have the city engineer here, so I'm happy to give you a better answer. But at the beginning of the project, we did not identify them as being under capacity, but we know that precipitation is going to increase about 13 to 20% over the next 40 years, and so planning for that would be important as the pumps are redesigned.
I live on 65th and 14th, and between 14 and 15, probably know the area already, yeah, but usually that area, you know how the drainage goes, there's an actual drainage system right there on 15, but it puddles. And it takes a very long time. That's why I'm asking, is the pump that's designated to that area efficient enough or strong enough to actually pull the water, because it does take a long time to drain.
So when you say, is it hours or days, 1 day, 2 day?
Well, yeah, at least a day.
Okay, at least a day.
Depends on the size, obviously. But
Okay.
usually when we have a storm,
Right?
it does flood enough that it takes a while. And if we have something heavy,
Yeah.
then it takes the whole street.
Is it like a foot of flooding on the street, or is it like a few inches? Yeah, 6 inches, okay.
But it's a lot, because it's
Sure. Right, and,
blocking the whole street.
okay. What would be your ideal scenario? How quickly?
Obviously, I guess it would drain more suction.
Okay,
I don't know, what's the easiest in here? I don't want to take the job.
excellent.
But I would guess it would be a bigger pump.
I guess the pumps were designed in the early 2000s, and they were designed at the time for 25 years. That's kind of the
Standard, yeah.
obviously rainfall intensity has increased over the years. What we try to do, that pump station serves most of 65th Avenue all the way from East Street to 16th Street. So if there's areas that are not being captured, it's not necessarily.
Well, it's probably because it's the farthest point.
Yeah, you're at the furthest point of the system. So either we have to look at extending the system, adding more capacity in the pipes. We are currently in the process of replacing the pumps because the more efficient pumps are always 20 years older. So those are all things that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's my
Certainly,
concern.
if you have spot issues, please let us know. Because we have annual drainage projects that we undertake. These are all maintained.
So I think you said between 13th and 14th on 65th, what did you?
Between 15 and 14
15 and 14, sorry,
on 60.
on 65th.
I'll check it out.
Okay.
There was also an issue on 14th Street that there was roots that were uprooting the street. And the problem is that, there's a lot of trees and stuff. So what happens is, the leaves were blocking also. It was creating a dam practically. So the flow going to the one right on the corner, there's a little drainage system right there on both sides. It's going down and then it's creating dams.
The roots or the leaf litter?
Yeah,
Okay.
the roots are lifting the road.
Mm-hmm.
And then they actually just fixed a little bit, they put a little asphalt on it, but the street is still elevated
Right.
enough that it still does it once in a while. It's better, but it's not fixed.
Okay. Good notes. Let's talk more about that in our group chat. So about 40% of some of the major roads and about 50% of some of the minor roads could be hard to pass during these major floods. So echoing some of the comments that you're making. And then about 40% of the homes would be vulnerable to a Category 5 storm, which is a very extreme event. But just, as people try and plan for more frequent events, it's important to note that where those areas are and try and make some personal improvements and mitigate flooding on your own property will always have you better set for future events, and then the city will complement that with mitigation projects. So with that, I'll take any questions. We do want to do some interaction tonight. Maybe talk a little bit more about what we're seeing as far as maintenance. My follow-up question would be, how often are we maintaining the drainage systems, right? So obviously in New Orleans, that's always been a contentious issue is, how often do you do it? Several times a year now. They have a different system, but that comes up from time to time, maintenance, trying to understand, community expectations, right? So you'd really ideally like to only see flooding for like a day, right? So that you can continue your normal activities. But let's set some of those expectations and standards, and we'll incorporate that in the group. But overall, I'd love to hear from you, if it sounds like it's prioritizing the lift stations, those pump stations, improvements at some of the parks, and then obviously looking at the roads around the school, if those would be good priorities to move forward with in the assessment. Okay? Sorry, honey, I'm stuck.
Sorry. I'm Anne Marie Sorrell, President and CEO of the Mosaic Group, and happy to be here. So the first thing we're going to start with is what we call like a one-word exercise to help with creating what you see as, is it, well, there's IT if it's not connecting. Is it connecting? Here we go. Okay. Okay, so to make it interactive, you all have your phones? Okay. So with this exercise, you're going to give us one word when you think about the city of West Miami and its vulnerability. So if you can take a moment to scan the QR code. Could be what you think about now or in the future. All right. Okay, everyone put their word in? Okay. All right, so as you can see on the screen, here are your responses. Housing cost burden, flooding, drainage, exposed, in progress, needs attention, frequent rain, insurance, road flooding, pumps, tree damage, groundwater, and scared? Am I reading that right? Yeah. So these are the thoughts that have come to the minds of those who are here in this room. And so as we look at the primary concerns that you have, our next exercise, we're going to give you some Post-its, and each of our boards are color-coded, and they address some of the components that Samantha went over, so like the natural resources, the critical assets, roads, schools, community resources, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you all 2 Post-its of each color. And what we want you to do is there's 2 boards. One is what are the issues or impact around these, and you'll see which boards to put it on. And then what are some solutions? Because we're all about solutions, and it's important that we hear the solutions from you, not just the problems. A lot of times we know what the problems are, and there are those of us who, you know, come from our different expertise and professions, and we may think we know the solutions, but it may not always be the right solution for your community. So it's important that we have your input on ensuring that the solutions that we pull together are also from you and what you think is best for your community. So you should receive, actually, Dr. McClinton, there should be 2 pink, 2 blue, 2 yellow, 2 green Post-its each. So we're gonna start with one at a time though, but as long as we get you your Post-its first. And then we have some pens if anybody doesn't have a pen. So So we're going to start with the pink board first. So when we think about critical issues, again, stormwater, treatment facilities, pump stations, lift stations, all of those different critical assets, what are some of the problems or a problem that you believe is at the forefront? And once you have your pink Post-it ready, just wave it and we will come get it from you and put it on the board. Thank you. All right. Do we have everyone's response for what the problem is? Not yet? Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a moment and read off, and our note takers here will take a few notes. So, Bridget, you want to read off what we have as what the problems are as it relates to critical assets?
Yes. We have maintenance of generators for lift stations, funding and taxes, capacity, sewer lift stations are at risk, pump stations are at risk, and updating drainage system.
Awesome. Okay, anyone have a thought or want to comment or expound on any of those?
I've noticed some of the swales, and this is very common, some of the swales are being used for parking or some people will fill them in, right? That reduces your capacity to store water. The first six inches, right, really should be going next to the street.
Okay, Dr. McClinty, you want to take a picture of that board for us? And now we're going to move that board and we'll look at the solutions, which are next pink Post-it. What do you think are some solutions or projects that you would like to see happen as a result of this vulnerability assessment? So what are some solutions or projects or changes that you would like implemented following the vulnerability assessment as it specifically relates to the critical assets? This is specifically for the critical assets. What are some projects or changes or solutions you would like to see implemented? Okay, is that everyone? I think we have went in on one more. Okay. Okay, so Bridget will start reading what the projects, changes, solutions that can be implemented following the assessment or as a part of the assessment.
We have permeable parking, floodable park elements, containerized temporary flood storage, and then for the sewer and pump station, the lift stations and the pump stations, we have harden, elevate the panels, upgrade capacity for drainage, and include generator for contingency. Yes. Okay. And then repaving the roads and add a curb to the avenue.
Awesome. All right, so now you're going to take out your blue Post-it. Yes, we can remove that one. Bridget, what is, my eyes are not that great, roads, okay. Okay, so when we look and think about roads, what are some of the problems or issues that you're seeing with the roads in West Miami? What are the problems or issues that you're seeing or impacts from any type of weather events that you're seeing with your roads? or even transportation as a whole. So it's not just the physical road. What about transportation? How is transportation impacted? Is traffic impacted? Is your sources of transportation impacted as well? All right, is that everyone? One more? Okay. Listen, just slow me down, okay? Yeah, if you have more, if you want more than one posted, that's fine. We just didn't want to overwhelm you.
Okay, we have elevation issues, uprooting of trees, damaging streets, too narrow and not enough curbs, some flooding, lack of pedestrian facilities, not all roads have curb drainage, need solutions for the roads, not part of system, and the road have worn and the flow is slow. Lights aren't safe.
All right. So now you're going to take your next blue post-it, or if you need another one because you used all two of yours, you're going to think about what are some projects or changes that could be implemented to help overcome the impacts or the issues that you just addressed. What can be done? Yes, what can be done in your opinion, or what would you like to see done? Listen, put it down there. I mean, that means you have all the solutions if we hire you. That means you know how to address every single problem. All right, any additional solutions or projects? Okay.
We have route pruning program.
Hmm.
Road widening, increased perforated parking, designated parking, more pedestrian connectivity, more drainage infrastructure, make a priority list and start from the top. Reshape swales, educate public of maintenance of swales.
Very good. All right, so the next Post-it that you should have in your possession is a yellow or gold, you know, however you describe it. Some people say gold, some people say yellow. And this one, you know, this is the probably two of the areas that most people resonate with in a community, your neighbors most resonate with, and that's community resources in schools. So when we think about community resources, that's everything from your community services, such as your city hall, city services, governmental services, as well as your schools, the infrastructure, even the traffic around the schools, the vulnerabilities to the schools, so on and so forth. So what challenges or impacts or issues do you feel or have observed as relates to your community resources and your schools? Yes. All your various facilities, all your public facilities. All right, do we have everyone? All right, Bridget? One more? Okay. I knew we'd probably get a lot on these two areas. Oh, that was the solutions. Okay. Okay, all right. Oh, hold, 1 second. All right, so we're going to go over the results for what are the impacts and issues around community resources in schools.
Alright, so we have access roads aren't designed for the drop off, so traffic is always backed up.
Mm.
Not enough space for activities. Park is too small for, and more opportunity for family events. Empower schools to request improvements rather than assuming district knows local issues.
Mm.
Sidewalks en route to school may be wet, connecting advocacy for infrastructure improvements with most popular recreation facilities. School parking, walkability to community resources, school parking, sidewalk maintenance and curb maintenance, so safety specifically there. And that's it.
Awesome. That was great. Wonderful. Okay, so now, what are some solutions or changes or projects that you would like to see to overcome these challenges that you've stated here or that you've collectively stated here? Or there may be other ones that now that we've talked about it that you can think of that you want some solutions for.
Churches are another community resource, to not forget about.
Places of worship.
Any place you work in the charter school, church.
Okay, is that it for solutions?
Increase services, expand Cooper Park, collaborate programs with public school and city, add dog park, more parking, collaborate with charter school, possible grants for sidewalk slash curbs for safety of pedestrians walking to community resources. Master plan around schools and parks for improved parking and modal infrastructure. We need to have the school board rep come to meet us here.
Okay. All right, so our last posted. Oh,
Well, quickly, share voting slash polling opportunities at sports slash community events. Request cost share from county for local mitigation projects. And that's all.
awesome. Okay, so our last category is, of course, green as we preserve our natural resources. And so when we think about our natural resources, parks, waterways, help me out here. Okay, so yeah, so all of our natural resources, what are some of the challenges that you see when it comes to the vulnerability of your natural resources here in the city? Some people say expanding the park because it's too small, but what else may be a vulnerability within the park outside of the size of it that you can think about? All right, ready, Bridget? Oh, one more. I'm like always jumping the gun. Does that mean I'm impatient? No? Okay.
So we have protecting tree canopy, preventing damage to trees and parks. The park needs a 4-foot perimeter fence that has beautiful landscaping. Increased costs for water management, drinking, and stormwater. Grass in parks requires maintenance and fertilizer. Tree roots exposed, maintenance, tree trimming, provide community information on right to tree, right place, educate on polluting, and increasing tree canopy to provide more shade, but also upkeep with the maintenance.
Awesome. All right. This is where you give us all you got here, your last post-it. Okay. So what is a solution or project that you would like implemented or change for your natural resources? All right.
We have reduced runoff with native vegetated rain gardens. We need to buy the lot on 65th Avenue and 14th Street to make it a dog park for sale now for $690,000. Is anyone serious? Preventing pollution through outreach and education, root pruning program to maintain the health. Consistent level of service standard applied to all roads, not just main roads, add vegetation. Increase tree canopy, park grant to increase playground, add water feature for family fun, add water fountain, widen walking, and increase parking. And then, provide or come up with a schedule on tree maintenance given the setback caused by weather.
Awesome. Well, give yourselves a round of applause. So we have one more ask of you, if you have not already done so. And of course, Samantha mentioned this in her presentation. So we do have our survey, which again will stay open till the end of the vulnerability assessment, but as much information as we can get as possible, we want to hear from you. Not only do we want to hear from you, we would like you to not only complete the survey yourself, but copy the link and share it with 10 of your neighbors. Okay, maybe 5. You may not talk to that many of your neighbors. But at least 5 of your neighbors or 10 people that you know in the community who would be, want to have their voice heard. Or they may not even know that this is happening. And it'll be great to get their input so that they can really feel like they're a part of this process and a part of the future, creating a more sustainable future for the city of West Miami. Any questions before we wrap up? Yes.
Just so you know my opinion first. You guys, I know you guys had this on Instagram,
Yeah.
but it would be better, I think, if you had it as a link. Because if I send a picture of this, it's no good. I have to actually go to their house, scan, not that I don't want to use my social, but it'd be easier if you just had it as a link, so it's easy to share.
Absolutely. We do have it as a link, and I do believe on the city social media page, it should be there as a link as well. And if you scan this, and I'm more than happy to help you, show you how to do it. If you scan it, I can show you how to, once you open it, I can show you how to copy that link, and then you can share it as well. Yeah, more than happy to show you how to do that before you leave. But yes, duly noted. No. Oh, no, you don't have to do that at all. No. Yeah. No, I'll share. If you just, when you scan it, it'll pop up and you click on it and that'll take you. I get exactly what you mean. Yes. Yeah. Oh, no, I got you. I'll show you how to do that. No. I'm going to come show you now. No better time like the present. Any other questions? Sam, you want to wrap up?
Okay, great. Well, this survey, we will post the recording of tonight's event for others to see. Please let your neighbors know that there will be, the project coming out shortly in the next couple months. If you have any interest in addressing certain flood issues within your neighborhood, please communicate that to the city, and also let the city know that you support them pursuing additional grants in order to address these issues. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. We're very grateful to hear from you, and we look forward to all of the city's success. Thank you.